Okay, this video is a video on the Nogales Wash Potrero Creek Conceptual Drainage Master Plan that the Santa Cruz County Flood Control District has been working on for the better part of the last 2 decades for the city of Nogales and the drainages affecting it that come from Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. To put this into perspective, here we have a map of the state of Arizona. The star is the city of Phoenix in Mariposa County. The green shaded box on the bottom of the state along the U.S.-Mexican border is Santa Cruz County, Arizona. Looking at the county more closely, we can see the boundaries for the city of Nogales and the town of Patagonia. We will be dealing mostly with this region here, which is the drainage of the Nogales Wash and Potrero Creek. So to look at it even closer, this outline here demonstrates the outlines or the drainage area of the Potrero Creek watershed, which includes the Nogales Wash. And there we can see some of the FEMA mapping superimposed on top of it that outlines the Nogales Wash here and Potrero Creek, which comes in here and then continues on to the Santa Cruz River. And just looking at it a little more closely, zooming in more on the city of Nogales, showing Interstate 19, again the city and the floodplain boundaries as they are currently mapped on the FEMA flood insurance rate maps. Just another view so that we can kind of see how much of the city is impacted. While from an aerial standpoint it's not a lot of the city, based on the mapping of the roads and whatnot that we can see there, we can see that a significant portion of the area of Nogales that is already developed is within the FEMA floodplain area. Again, looking at the city more closely, we begin to see more of the detail about the mapping and how much of the area, like here along Western Avenue, along Grand Avenue and Morley Avenue in the city, where a lot of the development is, and then some of the more commercial development, industrial development along Mariposa are in the current floodplain areas. This slide just illustrates some examples of some of the flooding that we have seen within the county over the last decade roughly, and some of the damages left behind by said flooding. And again, looking at the maps. So now we come to the Conceptual Master Plan. This involves a number of different proposed projects that we've been looking at, tying them together to come up with a more holistic, overarching plan of attack to deal with flooding in the city of Nogales. The city of Nogales is an old railroad town. It sits upon the old trade routes that date back into prehistory for the Native Americans, and in 1855 the town was founded as a railroad stop on the border. As such, the railroads followed the grades where they were shallow and where there was water available. So of the towns that were founded along the railroad in the American West and Southwest, we do tend to see a large number of them have significant drainage issues. So the plan that we've come up with includes primarily 3 large detention basins, some possible channel improvements, possible habitat restoration, as well as some other studies that we will discuss in brief. So again, we're going to keep in mind the city of Nogales. In this picture here, though the buildings don't show up, there's approximately 940, 950 properties that are in the floodplain or touched by the floodplain on this map. So let's start out with what is the first project we'd like to see done, which is the Efrain Detention Basin. This is an area between Interstate 19, the Mariposa port of entry, Holy Cross Hospital, and the U.S.-Mexican border. Because it's a deep canyon area, it's ideal for putting a retention basin in to capture, contain, and slowly release stormwaters downstream in a manner that would be less devastating to the downstream areas. We've been working on some feasibility and design concept work on this with Stantec Consulting out of Tucson since January of 2014. And the basin is designed to basically lower the discharge of the 100-year event, or the 1% flood, by approximately 90%, resulting in flows that can be handled by the downstream channel. So to put this into perspective, this is Interstate 19 right here, coming through the city of Nogales. This is Holy Cross Hospital in this area. This is the Mariposa port of entry, and of course the U.S.-Mexican border. The area highlighted in this area is the area that we would expect to place the basin and be affected by the presence of the basin. The red on the downstream side is what we believe, based on our discussion with FEMA and the engineers, what the 100-year floodplain should revert to once the basin is constructed. So we can see a large, significant reduction in the floodplain area. This is a schematic of the basin as it is currently designed to be built. It's a large above ground berming structure similar to a dam. It would have a open pipe that would drain through constantly with an emergency spillway. This is designed such that the emergency spillway should not see water until about the 500-year flood event. This will give us some resiliency against the possibility of the effects of climate change in the future, as well as future development in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, which will greatly impact the drainage of the Efrain Canyon Wash should it occur. 50 properties, removing something like 270 structures from the floodplain. It would greatly reduce the impact of flooding on Western Avenue. Western Avenue, of course, leads to the Holy Cross Hospital, which is the regional hospital in Santa Cruz County. If Western Avenue is flooding, you have to detour around either through I-19 or around through Mariposa Avenue to be able to reach the hospital. If Grand is underwater, then there literally is no way in and out of the area for the residents. Moving on to the Mariposa Detention Basin. This is along the Mariposa Wash, northeast of Mariposa Road, and east of the industrial area along La Quinta. There's an old borrow pit there that was created during the construction of Interstate 19. This pit has already been breached by the river channel, so using this pit, making it deeper, giving it a modernized, controlled inlet-outlet structure so that the water can come in without bringing a lot of sediment, and the water can be contained and leave in a controlled manner. We believe we can decrease the flows downstream significantly to the point where they'll stay in channel. To look at this, just here to the south, this was the Efrain Canyon Wash that we were looking at earlier. This is the Mariposa Wash. The area we're actually looking at is here near the boundary of the city of Nogales and almost the National Forest Service land. So looking at the possible effects of this basin, the preliminary estimates that we've looked at is that we can put a large enough basin in here to basically take the flow of the Mariposa Wash and contain it to channel. And this is basically, the red here is the channel area from the point of the basin downstream to the confluence with the Nogales Wash. While it removes a significant area from the floodplain, in terms of the sheer number of properties or buildings affected, it does not look as impactful as the Efrain Canyon Wash basin would, but that's because most of the properties here are large industrial commercial properties. And so while the sheer volume of properties and the sheer number of buildings is lower, it has an equally significant impact in reduction of flood potentials to the for the area. The third and final basin that we've looked at is the Baffert Basin, or what we're calling the Baffert Basin. Within the city of Nogales, in the floodplain for the Nogales Wash, is a large 40-acre plus parcel that is currently being used for agricultural land. This area would make an ideal location for a detention basin along the Nogales Wash. The idea would be for a side weir basin, so that when flows get to be close to channel full, they would then weir into this basin or overflow into the basin. One of the things that we've looked at in there is how big of a basin could be put into there, what the effect of that basin would be, making the assumptions that the Efrain Canyon and the Mariposa basins were actually installed. So to give us an example of where we're talking about, again, this is the Mariposa Wash. The Baffert Basin would be in this general vicinity up in here. Zooming in, we're looking at literally all of this flat land down here, and we believe that from about this point forward on the basin that we could actually take and contain the channel, contain to the channel the 100-year event of the Nogales Wash. In fact, this was part of the preliminary study done for us by Stantec Consulting, looking at the effects of the basins. The red line is the existing hydrograph for the Nogales Wash. The blue line here would be the Nogales Wash if we had only the Mariposa and the Efrain Canyon basins in place. Notice that it is a significant reduction in the peak discharge event from around 22,000 to around 14,000 CFS. So that's a significant decrease. But that's not what the channel capacity is. Channel capacity is less than that, so we would still see overland flooding from this point downstream. If we bring Efrain in online on top of this, that would put a cap to the downstream discharge of about 7,500 CFS, which would be just enough to remain in channel from this point downstream. So looking at it again, here is the proposed area of the basin, and this would be part of the what we think would be the resulting floodplain for the Nogales Wash. This here is Potrero Creek coming in. This would not be affected by those three basins. This area here may see some benefit in reduction of floodplain discharges, but that remains to be seen. So some of the design features that we're looking at for the Baffert Basin, one of the long-standing problems with the Nogales Wash is the large volumes of trash that come through the wash system coming out of Mexico for the most part. One of the things that we looked at possibly installing as a design feature within the basin would be some sort of a headwork system, a trash rack system at the inlet to help remove the debris and trash that's coming into the wash right now, at least help cut down the amount that's going downstream into the Santa Cruz River. We also think that some of the upper ends of the basin, or the southern ends of the basin, would be able to be designed in a manner that they would have some elevated platforms in them so that they could have soccer, baseball, and or softball fields, very much like the Kino Environmental Restoration Project in in the city of Tucson has near Kino Hospital and what used to be called Tucson Electric Park. Another possible project that we're looking at is the Potrero Creek habitat restoration. The area of Chula Vista and Pete Kitchen have long suffered from flooding coming from both the Nogales Wash and the Potrero Creek. While the basins will greatly reduce the impact of flooding or eliminate the impact of flooding from the Nogales Wash, they would not do anything for Potrero Creek. One of the things that we're looking at for Potrero Creek is the restoration of the wetland habitats that used to be in the area. This is a map of the area. This is the Potrero Creek coming through here. This is part of what used to be the Potrero Golf Course in the city of Nogales. The golf course is long since defunct. The course has gone fallow for a number of years, closing into a decade or more now. And so one thing we want to look at is the fact that when that golf course was constructed, the existing wetlands that were there were actually filled in to construct the golf course. We would like to see about removing the fill that was put into to make the golf course, restoring the natural wetland area. We believe that it could look something like this in general, as some of the areas that potentially could be restored. Of course, this could be greatly exaggerated about what would be done, but this gives us the maximum potential idea. And basically, by restoring the wetlands, we would return the floodplain storage capability to the area, which would help decrease the discharge downstream. We also think that this could be tied into a proposed children's museum, science museum to be placed here, and could be keyed in with or built with walkways and bird blinds in mind for birders to make use of some ecotourism possibilities. The hardest area to try to mitigate is the downtown Nogales area. It's one of the most vulnerable areas to flooding, mainly because the water is coming across from Nogales, Sonora. It's originating in Mexico. And for all intents and purposes, there's very little control over flooding that and development that happens in Nogales, Sonora that would reduce the discharge of water onto Nogales, Arizona. So we've looked at a couple of things that might be able to help in the area. One of these is doing a new hydrology study for the downtown area. When we did our remapping in 2006 through 2011, we were provided a discharge from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, to use for the Nogales Wash. That discharge, it turns out, came from a report done by the Army Corps of Engineers. That report, which I found a copy of after we had done the mapping, basically stated that the discharge we were using was, and I quote, a statistical average of similar sized watersheds in other regions of the country, end quote. What this means in short is that they looked at other watersheds that were roughly the same size that they had a discharge for, and they averaged them together and took an average. In reality, that means that this hard science was never done to figure out what the discharge is. So Santa Cruz County is working on that. We have initial results that seem to indicate that the discharge might be able to be reduced by anywhere between 20 and 25%, which seems counterintuitive because of the concerns of what happens with urbanization. As you urbanize an area, as you build more cities, more streets, more parking areas, more buildings, you decrease the amount of land that's available for the water to be absorbed by the ground, and you increase the amount of runoff that's going to happen because you have increased the amount of impervious surface. A good example is that basically general rule of thumb for southern Arizona is that when it rains, more or less about 70% of the water, as long as it's not too torrential of a rainstorm is going to soak into the ground, and about 30% is going to run off. When you have a highly developed area that's all concrete, all asphalt with buildings, that number becomes something like 90 to 95% of all the water hitting the ground is going to run off. So you greatly increase the amount of water running off. But in Nogales, Sonora, the way the development has occurred, they have also obliterated the flow path. So the flow paths no longer really exist. So the water now has to wander through the city. And in some cases, it literally has to try to flow uphill to get around and through buildings. So this is going to have an effect of slowing down the water. You're still going to see a net increase in the total volume of water overall from start to end of an event, but it's going to take longer for that water to work its way through, which will decrease the peak discharge. And that's what our math is currently showing us. Another possibility for fixing Nogales, Arizona flooding issue is widening of the Nogales Wash channel. The current channel through most of downtown Nogales, where it is exposed at least, is a concrete lined channel that was constructed. Construction started circa 1929, 1930, finished somewhere around 1933. At the time, that channel worked beautifully, but it's now well over 80 years old. It is, for all intents and purposes, falling apart structurally. It keeps getting damaged every time we have a large rainfall event, and it just does not have capacity anymore. So one possible fix is to go along some parts of the wash where we can and widen it. One of the things that we've looked at just conceptually is if we take the area along Morley Avenue and widen it out, maybe have a little area here for a bike path, a walking path, but widen it out by making the embankment a little steeper on the side towards the railroad, on the side towards Morley Avenue. Maybe take half of Morley Avenue out, make Morley Avenue a one-way street, and that would actually help us increase the discharge that could be contained within the system by something like 54%, if I remember correctly. And if we go further north along Hohokam Drive, near the city's Public Works building, again, steepening the side near the railroad embankment and taking half of Hohokam and turning it into all channel, we could increase the discharge capacity of the channel there by something like 83%, helping to reduce the flooding that takes place. Now, this is by no means are either of these increases enough to fully contain the flows, at least as they are currently mapped, but it would give us better control over the system. If you asked why not go deeper with this, well, the problem is that the International Outfall Interceptor sewer line, which brings raw sewage from Mexico into the United States for treatment, sits just a couple of feet below the bottom of the existing channel. So digging the channel deeper would require that sewer line to be relocated, and that sewer line brings in something like 9 to 10 million gallons of raw sewage a day. Moving that is a major construction project that has major ramifications for the working sewer systems in the city of Nogales, Arizona, and the city of Nogales, Sonora, and is just simply too expensive to consider trying to do. One of the other things is looking at the underground tunnels. Most of the flow coming into the United States from Nogales, Sonora is coming in underground tunnels. Perhaps something can be done to look at increasing the capacity of those tunnels, or maybe creating underground galleries similar to ones that have been done in other places like Las Vegas or parts of Seattle or Tokyo, to give additional holding capacity for the flow that can then drain out more slowly. But given issues with border tunnels and concerns about the stability of the existing above ground structures, this may not be a reasonable approach. Another possibility is a complete retrofit of the downtown area. This would be basically taking and rebuilding all of the buildings such that the first floor is really now the second floor of the buildings. The idea might be to turn the existing first floors into covered parking. Maybe do a skywalk to allow movement between buildings without having to go up and down the stairs. And if you have a skywalk, well, then maybe you could do a bridge across the railroad, in which case that removes pedestrian traffic from interacting with the rails. It's a possibility. It's something that could potentially be done. It's not a cheap option. It would require the buy-in of a large number of property owners simultaneously to do right. So just kind of looking at an overview once again for the City of Nogales, we're looking at Efrain Basin, Mariposa Basin, Efrain Basin, Mariposa Basin, Baffert Basin, the Potrero Creek Habitat Restoration Area, as well as some possible channel widening and a restudy. Beyond that, we're also looking at the Nogales Wash, Potrero Creek channelization and river park. Over the years, the Nogales Wash has been a degradational system, meaning that it's cutting downwards. In the recent 4 to 5 years, that down cutting has stopped, and the river system has moved into the next phase of landscape development, which is it's starting to widen. And this widening system, is threatening some infrastructure and structures. So we're looking at what can be done to try to get ahead of the curve on this. This is not something that's going to be an easy fix where you just concrete line the whole channel and be done with it, because of the way the channel is situated and the way the instabilities it has in it right now, as well as the need to be able to access the area for maintenance. So one of the things that we thought about is maybe doing a system where we kind of pre-widen the channel, maybe deepen it a little bit in some areas so that we can have a low channel and an upper channel area, and then where we have to have our roads for maintenance, construction of the bank protection that's going to be needed in there. Once that's done and not being used for maintenance or construction or inspection, those roads can then serve as a walking path or a biking path through the area connecting Nogales, Arizona to Rio Rico, Arizona. So this kind of looks at what we're talking about in terms of the study that we've done. It goes from the area of the Chula Vista project. Here's Chula Vista, Arizona, just north of the city of Nogales, and winds along the Nogales Wash up to the Santa Cruz River in Rio Rico, Arizona. The conceptual cross-section plan that was developed for this by the engineer J.E. Fuller, Hydrology and Geomorphology out of Tucson, has one where the path can be fully opened up, a channel area that would be incised about 8 feet deep, 75 feet wide as a low flow channel, and then an upper channel that would be up to 200 feet wide that is graded to daylight, and on there would be alternative, would be a pathway, 10-foot wide pathway that would serve as access for construction and then follow-up maintenance and inspections. But then when it's not being used for maintenance and inspections, can serve as a walking path or a bike path for the local residents. So that would go from just north on the map up in here, north to Rio Rico. But that pretty much does it for this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the Santa Cruz County Flood Control District. My name is John Hayes. I can be reached at jhays, Hays, at santacruzcountyaz.gov. Thank you.